Hello, my name's Gerard Reinmuth, founder of Terroir, and I'm very pleased to be here on WAF Virtual, greeting you from Bondi Beach in Sydney, where I live. The photo behind me is the beach the other day. Australia's turned a corner. I've lost count of how many days. Sydney's had no cases, and the whole of Australia had a run of a few days last week. So we're ending the year in a very different way that others are, and in a different way that we in fact started. Of course, in March, we watched what was happening in China and then Italy and the US, and went to a very tough lockdown for 6 weeks. For most practices, it was very difficult. For our practice, 50% of our cash flow died in 24 hours. So as we got to the end of March, we literally had our stomachs in our mouths. Australia's response to COVID, which has given us scenes you see behind me, has been interesting because we have a centre-right government that doesn't like to support reduction in fossil fuel use, that struggles sometimes to admit that there's human impact on the climate. Yet all of a sudden science was popular. Via a series of public health forces, we've had quite a ruthless response to the virus. The most extreme being the shutting of international borders. None of us really noticed this back in March when it happened, but by June, July, you have a country where in Sydney, 50% of people speak another language at home than English. So there's a huge connectivity between Australians and other countries. And they're very sad stories of people that haven't been able to watch relatives die or separated from their children. But the outcome has been a country effectively that has now suppressed the virus completely. Economically, things have been very interesting here. When everything hit in March, like many other countries, Australia had a huge stimulus package called JobKeeper. Unlike some other countries, our team still worked for us while also receiving salary subsidies. It's resulted in an embarrassing aftermath where some major public companies have released huge dividends this year. So flush are they with the government's cash. But it has had the result of reducing unemployment queues, keeping business going. And this has been a very positive thing. The part of my life that's not in Terroir is teaching at the University of Technology in Sydney, and watching the university sector has been very different to watching the private sector. Our government has a long-standing war with the university sector, and under the cover of COVID, we saw it excluded from all the government programs, and certainly doubling the cost of certain programs such as humanities, anything non-instrumental. And colleagues around the country in architecture school are finding themselves experiencing 20 to 40% staff cuts. It's complete brutality, and I'm not sure what it will mean for waking up on the other side of this. In the industry here, it's been very interesting. As I said, we had our heart in our mouths in March. Things corrected very quickly, actually. The government poured an enormous amount of money into planning and urban strategy work. Our practice is involved in quite a lot of that, as it really tried to bed down strategies for new investments once COVID is over, new investments in the city. At the same time, we've also seen a change to our city. Sydney is notoriously overregulated in terms of how we use public space. And all of a sudden we found that people were able to have relaxed external eating rules. Bike lanes were put in almost overnight. And so there's been a radical change to our city under the cover of COVID. And as negotiations around these things ensue, we'll see what happens as we enter next year. Even residential architecture in the last crisis, a lot of friends who do houses really hit the wall. This time around in a wealthy country where a lot of people were travelling to Europe for holidays, and that travel didn't happen this year, so people have tens of thousands of dollars to spend on renovating their house. That's what people have been doing. Our interest is in public buildings, and behind me now is our Penguin Parade Visitor Centre, which is in WAF Future Project 2017. And it's a project that completely stopped, of course, major tourism project when COVID hit. And as many have tried to make sense of this period, our friends at the Penguin Parade actually broadcast the penguins coming ashore at twilight on a feed every night, and there are hundreds of thousands of people around the world watching this while in lockdown. Another project, Puffing Billy, WAF, actually Future Project 2018, is almost finished. It's been built all year in Victoria. Victoria had a spike of cases, a very small spike by international standards, but resulted in a 111-day lockdown. And so this meant that we've actually had to have an existential crisis of the architect. We value so much our role on site, and we found that we've been able to complete the whole project via drone imagery and Zoom. So this is very interesting as it comes to a completion now. And then finally, you'll see now some images of Burnie Northwest Museum and Art Gallery, a major project about to start documentation this year. And as a municipal funded project, it's been on pause with COVID, and we hope that it starts again next year. So I'll finish with a scene from my day yesterday, which is just really a way of saying that as we watched our friends in Europe skid around Mediterranean islands in July while we were in winter and locked down, we wondered if we would ever see the sun again or see outside again. As it happened, we're now in this situation, as I said, with no cases basically, and living life relatively normally. We're 4 weeks from our long summer break, and we are actually now looking forward to that after, of course, what's been a tough year. To all our friends overseas, and particularly all those whose countries haven't been able to get on top of the virus, we wish you well. And to Terroir's friends across the world watching this, if there's anything we can do for you, let us know. Thank you. Cheers.